What happens when the man who owns the building walks in through the front door and no one knows who he is? Victor Monroe stood across the street, staring through the windows of one of his coffee shops. The morning rush had just begun, people spilling in with tired eyes and hurried steps. This was one of 15 locations he owned, part of a chain he'd bought 6 years ago from a humble couple who had poured their hearts into building it from the ground up. Back then, it was just a dream. A warm, community-focused spot that served more than just coffee. It offered connection, but dreams evolve. Now, Victor lived in the world of spreadsheets, executive calls, and high-rise offices. Most days he was far removed from the aroma of freshly ground beans or the small smiles exchanged over the counter. He hadn't met half of the current staff anymore. Names came and went. Yet something about this shop had pulled him in today. He'd been hearing whispers, quiet, unsettling complaints. Customers saying the place had lost its warmth, that something was off. So he decided to find out for himself. He pulled his hoodie closer around his face, the sleeves slightly frayed. His once polished beard now looked peppered with gray, thanks to a touch of dye. Thick-rimmed glasses rested low on his nose. A subtle limp he'd practiced for days added years to his gait. The jacket he wore still smelled faintly like mothballs, an authentic thrift store find. He didn't look like a man who owned a multi-million-dollar business. He looked like someone debating whether he could spare the few dollars for a hot drink. Victor crossed the street slowly, his steps measured and intentional. He opened the door and stepped into the familiar yet strangely foreign space. The smell hit first. Fresh espresso, steamed milk, cinnamon. But there was a chill behind it. The music was too loud, the kind that might belong in a bar at midnight rather than a coffee shop at 8 a.m. Tables sat uncleared. The floor had sticky spots. And behind the counter, 2 baristas leaned close, lost in their own world, chatting like no one else existed. He stepped into line behind a young woman in a sharp blazer who looked like she'd already been waiting too long. She raised her hand gently, trying to get the cashier's attention. "Excuse me," she said. The tall barista barely glanced at her. "1 sec," he muttered, his tone dismissive. Victor's stomach twisted. He wasn't here just to catch someone slacking off. He was here to feel what the customers felt. And what he felt now was irritation layered with something heavier. Disappointment. Eventually, the barista waved him forward. The guy was tall, with sharp cheekbones and a smirk that said he'd rather be anywhere else. "What do you want?" Victor scanned the menu above the counter, pretending to hesitate. "Medium cappuccino. Oat milk, please." The barista raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" Victor paused. "Yeah. Why?" The guy gave him a slow, deliberate look, up and down. "That's like $8, man. You can't afford this." Victor froze. The words slammed into him, not just because they were rude, but because of how casually they were said, like tossing out yesterday's trash. He stood there, stunned. I have cash," he finally muttered, reaching into his pocket. The barista rolled his eyes. "Sure, whatever. Prepay. No refunds." He grabbed the $10 bill from Victor's hand without a word of thanks. Victor stepped to the side, trying to keep his hands from shaking. His chest felt tight. Humiliation wasn't a feeling he encountered often anymore, but it was a powerful one. While he waited, he watched the other side of the counter. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, worked fast and with quiet focus. Her name tag read, Jessa Galloway. She moved with intention, checking names, apologizing when mistakes were made even if they weren't hers, cleaning up spills without being asked. There was a softness in her eyes, but a fire in her pace. She reminded him of the original owners, how they used to treat every customer like a guest at their table. When his drink came, it was wrong, regular milk. But Victor didn't complain. He simply took it, walked to the window, and sat down. For the next 40 minutes, he watched. He saw a man spill his drink and ask the cashier, Troy, his name tag read, for napkins. Troy ignored him. Jessa noticed and rushed over with a towel. He saw a customer with a heavy accent try to order, and Troy mimic it mockingly, loud enough for others to hear. The customer left, visibly embarrassed. He saw a man in a tailored suit skip the line, and Troy serve him immediately without so much as a glance at those waiting. And he saw Jessa, quietly, consistently, step in to smooth things over. No ego, no performance, just heart. Victor didn't finish his drink. The bitterness wasn't from the coffee, it was in his chest. Back in his car, he pulled out a notepad and wrote 3 lines. Jessa, strong leadership potential. Troy, immediate investigation, toxic attitude. Return tomorrow. Speak to district manager, quietly. That night, Victor barely slept. Not because of anger, but because of shame. He had walked into his own store and been treated like he didn't belong. Not by mistake, not by accident, but by a deliberate choice. That barista had looked at him, looked through him, and decided he wasn't worth respect. And maybe, just maybe, that meant something in his company had gone deeply wrong. Victor had poured a decade of his life into this company. Late nights, missed family dinners, dreams sacrificed for systems and structure. But somehow, inside this particular store, his legacy felt like a rumor no one believed. His name meant nothing here, but that was about to change. Before dawn broke the horizon, Victor sat quietly in his car 2 blocks away. The thrifted jacket still clung to him, its sleeves now creased with sweat from yesterday. A baseball cap was pulled low over his eyes. He wasn't ready to walk in just yet. Instead, he watched. The shop blinked awake in pieces. One by one, the lights flickered on. A delivery van rumbled to the curb, unloaded a few crates with mechanical precision, and then disappeared down the street. At exactly 5:40, he spotted her. Jessa, hair pulled into a neat bun, thermos tucked under her arm, keys ready in hand. She looked both determined and tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from a bad night's sleep, but from weeks of pushing beyond what's reasonable. She unlocked the door, glanced over her shoulder as if sensing the weight of something unspoken behind her, and stepped inside. Victor waited. He knew how quickly energy shifted once the doors opened. He wanted to feel it from the inside, unfiltered. He had made a quiet call the night before to Lyle Hastings, the district manager, and arranged to be shadowed under a false identity. He used a name he hadn't spoken since college, Rick Madsen. Lyle, familiar with internal audits, didn't press for details, just followed orders. No warnings were sent to the staff, no memos. This would be raw, real. At 6:15, Victor slipped through the back entrance. The air smelled of lemon disinfectant, old espresso grounds, and something else. Maybe resignation. The kind that slowly sets in when culture begins to rot from within. Jessa looked up from the sink, surprised to see him there. Her hands were deep in a milk frother she was scrubbing. She blinked, then returned to rinsing without skipping a beat. "You the new guy?" she asked, drying her hands on a towel that had clearly seen better days. He nodded. "Rick said I'd be training here today." "Lucky me," she replied, not sarcastically, just worn. "I'm Jessa. I'll get you an apron." She handed him a black apron from the back locker, then motioned to the sink. "Wash up. Have you worked Almar Zacco machines before?" "I've worked machines," he answered, carefully non-committal. "Then you'll catch on fast. Just don't mess with the grinder until you've checked the dial. We calibrate it every morning." She moved like someone who didn't have time for unnecessary words. Efficient, but present. As she showed him the ropes, Victor took everything in. The way she multitasked inventory checks with training, how she gently corrected mislabeled syrups, how she cleared a brimming trash bin without asking for help, without complaint. It wasn't just competence, it was ownership, invisible and uncelebrated. By 6:45, the line outside began to form. Troy sauntered in at 6:50, 5 minutes before the opening bell. He didn't greet anyone. No apology, no acknowledgement. just leaned against the wall, scrolled through his phone, and yawned like the day owed him something. "Morning," Jessa called out, her voice calm but urgent. "We're already behind on prep." "I'm not on bar today," Troy muttered without looking up. "You're on register. We need backup on drinks until we catch up." "That's not my job." Jessa didn't push. Instead, she turned to Victor. "You good with milk and espresso if I call out the drinks?" He nodded. She trusted fast, but only because she had no choice. At exactly 7 o'clock, the front doors unlocked. The morning wave hit like a storm. People poured in, commuters, regulars, first-timers, and no one noticed the man behind the counter pulling shots and steaming milk like he was learning on the fly. Victor worked slower than usual, careful to play the role. A little clumsy, but always clean. Jessa noticed. He could tell. She didn't say anything, just adjusted seamlessly to his pace. Troy, meanwhile, rang orders with dead eyes. No hellos, no smiles. Names were mangled, misheard, or ignored altogether. One name? He got it wrong 3 times, then laughed like it was a joke the customer should be in on. Victor saw Jessa's jaw tighten. By 7:20, the line stretched halfway to the door. The printer kept spitting out tickets like a machine unraveling. Jessa called names clearly, corrected Troy's sloppy orders without blaming him, and worked like her sanity depended on it. Troy dumped drinks on the counter without even calling out names. Sometimes he mumbled, sometimes he just walked away. Then it happened. A teenage girl stepped up in a neatly pressed school uniform, her backpack slung low. "I think mine's missing," she said softly. Troy snorted. "You sure you're not just confused?" She blinked. "No, I ordered number—" He cut her off, not even listening. She held out a receipt like a lifeline. Troy glanced, waved vaguely at the side counter. "It's right there. Open your eyes next time." "It wasn't," she said, quieter now. Jessa stepped in. She checked the receipt, looked behind the bar, and whispered, "It didn't get made. I'll handle it." Victor watched the girl sit by the window, hands clenched in her lap, staring at the table. She didn't cry, but he could see how much she wanted to. At 8:15, the second wave hit hard. A crew of construction workers placed a large order, 15 drinks. Troy rolled his eyes. "Here we go," he muttered. Then, Victor watched in real time as Troy deliberately entered 5 of the orders wrong. On purpose. Victor leaned in. "That's not what they asked for." Troy didn't even look at him. "They won't know the difference." That was the moment Victor snapped, not loudly, not with anger, but with the quiet precision of a man who had finally seen enough. He stepped away, pulled out his phone, and typed a single message to Lyle. "Come to this location now." Then he returned to the line. Jessa was red-faced, not from embarrassment, but exhaustion. She was trying to remake drinks, multitasking damage control like a soldier in a trench. Still calm, still standing. One of the construction workers came back holding a cup. "This isn't ours," he said. Troy shrugged without looking. "Then don't drink it." Victor stepped forward. "You need to remake that." Troy turned, annoyed. "Who even are you? You've been here 5 minutes." Victor locked eyes with him. "I'm someone who knows the difference between coffee and contempt." Troy rolled his eyes, scoffing. "Whatever." 15 minutes later, Victor stood outside the shop, still wearing his apron, drying his hands on a towel that now felt more like a badge of purpose than disguise. The morning rush had slowed, but something deeper was about to shift. When Lyle finally arrived, Victor didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need him off the floor," he said, voice even. Lyle raised an eyebrow. "You want to write him up?" "No," Victor replied, his eyes locked in. "I want him fired, on the spot." Lyle blinked. That was rare. "Victor, are you sure?" Victor didn't flinch. He mocked a customer, lied on drink orders, disrespected his co-workers. He doesn't belong in this company. He's done. There was no need for more discussion. Lyle nodded, turned, and headed inside. Victor followed closely. Troy was mid-pour when Lyle called his name. "Come with me to the office." Troy looked up, annoyed. "Why? I'm busy." "We need to talk, now." Troy scoffed but followed. As the two disappeared into the back, Jessa looked over at Victor. "What was that about?" Victor took a breath, then slowly pulled off his cap, removed the thick glasses. The disguise slipped away. "I'm Victor Monroe," he said softly. "I own this company." Her eyes widened. She didn't step back. She didn't panic. She just stared, stunned. Not in fear, just understanding. Her instinct kicked in. She had known something had been off, and now it made sense. "I came in undercover," he continued, "because I needed to see this place for what it really is. And now I do." She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. "You've been holding this place together, quietly, alone. That ends today." Her voice finally emerged. "So, are you sending someone?" Victor shook his head. "Number, I'm staying. All week." There was a pause. She nodded. The espresso machine hissed behind them. The shop kept breathing. "And after that," he added, "we're going to talk about what you really want to do here." Still, she said nothing, but her eyes said everything. Not relief, recognition. Someone had finally seen her, not just as a worker, but as a leader. By the time Troy re-emerged, escorted by Lyle, his apron was folded tightly under one arm, like a white flag. No eye contact, no words, just a quiet departure. The shop fell into an eerie stillness. Even the background music felt like it had dimmed. The other barista, Rihanna, avoided eye contact, quietly restocking lids. But Jessa didn't ask questions. She didn't pause. She just worked. Faster, sharper, like the weight had lifted and her purpose had sharpened into something new. For the first time that morning, the tension in the room cracked and dissolved. Victor stayed behind the counter, grinding beans, refilling syrups, wiping counters. No orders, no ego, just work. And Jessa didn't treat him like a CEO. She treated him like any other team member. That was exactly what he wanted. By 9:30, the storm had passed. The early commuters were gone, replaced by students setting up laptops and older couples savoring muffins. The pace had settled. Victor motioned to Rihanna. "Take a quick break." She hesitated, then nodded and disappeared into the back. It was just him and Jessa now. He leaned in, keeping his voice low. "You ever think about applying for a manager position?" She didn't look up from the register. "I did, 3 months ago." Victor's brow tightened. "You interviewed?" "No one called," she said flatly. "I followed up, twice." His jaw clenched. "Who was supposed to review it?" "Lyle. He told me he was still looking at options." Victor exhaled. "And Troy got the job instead." She nodded, her hand still working the till. "He's been here longer." "Technically, that's not how we're supposed to do things." Jessa paused. Her hand stopped moving for just a second. "It's how it usually works." Victor didn't respond. He didn't have to. The silence said more than anger ever could. By 10:15, Rihanna returned, and Jessa went to the back to grab inventory forms. Victor stepped in at the register. Customers continued to trickle in. Most didn't recognize him. "You're new," one older man joked. Victor smiled gently, learning the ropes. At 11 sharp, Lyle returned, this time with another barista from a nearby store. Karina, quick hands, sharp eyes. She fell into sync with Jessa instantly, no directions needed. Victor watched them work together, fluid, efficient, kind. Even Rihanna seemed to brighten, greeting customers, asking how their day was going. The store was becoming what it was always meant to be. By noon, Victor pulled Lyle into the back office. "You knew Troy was a problem," he said. Lyle didn't deny it. He was difficult, but experienced. Did the team want to work with him? Number. But he covered shifts, trained people, when he felt like it. After our last supervisor quit, we needed someone. And you gave the job to someone who made the problem worse. Jessa's good, Lyle admitted, but she's quiet. I didn't think she could handle pressure. Victor didn't raise his voice. She's been doing the job for months while Troy made everyone's life harder. Lyle shifted in his chair. I didn't see it that way. Number, you didn't look. A long pause. What do you want me to do? Victor didn't blink. I'm not asking. Jessa is the interim manager now. You'll make it official by week's end. She gets full back pay for every hour she's worked above her title. That's not how we usually... Then change how we usually do it. Lyle nodded, quiet. Victor walked out without another word. Back on the floor, Jessa was helping a woman with a stroller weave between crowded tables. She noticed Victor returning. Everything all right? She asked. You're in charge now, he said simply. She blinked. Wait. What? I talked to Lyle. It's done. You're the new store manager. Effective immediately. She didn't respond. Just stared, the weight of those words struggling to find a place in her reality. You earned it, he said. I mean that. I don't know what to say. You don't have to. Just keep doing what you've already been doing. She nodded. Slowly. Thank you. Victor turned to help a customer lingering by the pastry case. After taking the order, he stepped outside for the first time in hours. The sun hit his face like truth. The air felt lighter, the weight of the morning shedding off his shoulders. He crossed the street and sat on a bench where he could see everything. Inside, the line had begun to form again. Karina and Jessa moved in sync. Rihanna laughed with a customer. Nobody inside knew he was watching, and that's exactly how he liked it. But the day wasn't over yet. At 2 p.m., the afternoon lull settled over the café like a warm exhale. Victor stepped back inside, scanning the floor instinctively. Behind the counter, Rihanna was quietly refilling the napkin dispenser. Her shoulders looked more relaxed than this morning. He approached her gently, tapping her shoulder with the same care one might use to turn the page of a fragile book. Can I ask you something? He said softly. She turned, a little startled, then nodded. Do you feel supported here? Like you're truly part of a team? The question seemed to catch her off guard, not because it was inappropriate, but because it was rare. She paused longer than he expected. Sometimes, she said finally, voice low but honest. When Jessa's around, yeah, she keeps things together. But before today? Her words faded, caught between truth and diplomacy. You don't have to explain, Victor said gently. I saw what you meant. She looked at him differently now. Really looked. A flicker of realization passed across her face. You're him, aren't you? He smiled faintly, a bit of tiredness in it. Yeah, I'm him. She didn't recoil. She didn't even apologize for not knowing. Instead, her eyes softened. I thought you were too calm to be new. Victor chuckled just once. I've had some practice. She nodded. Well, I'm glad you saw it for yourself. So am I, he replied, and he meant it. By closing time, the shift had settled into something that resembled harmony. Not perfection, but rhythm. Lyle had returned briefly, confirming Karina would stay on through the week while they posted for a new assistant role. Jessa was already working ahead. She handed Victor a clipboard with a list. Not complaints, but solutions. Equipment upgrades, policy adjustments, suggestions that showed she had been quietly observing cracks in the system and thinking about how to seal them. If we're doing this right, she said simply, we need to fix these. Victor read each line carefully. Additional training hours for new hires, a clearer system for reporting shift issues, a rotating lead schedule to prevent burnout and favoritism. He nodded. Approved. All of it. But Jessa didn't just nod back. She hesitated. Will it actually happen this time? She asked. Her voice was quiet, but her eyes weren't. They were demanding truth. Victor didn't waver. Yes. And this time, he meant it without a single thread of doubt. He stayed through the entire close, helped wipe down the tables, shut off the espresso machine, locked the doors. Outside, the street lamps flickered to life as night draped itself over the sidewalk. He and Jessa stood in the cool air, their breath visible between quiet words. "You ever think about running more than one store?" he asked casually. She raised an eyebrow, smirking slightly. "Is that a trick question?" "No," he smiled. "It's a real one." Jessa looked thoughtful for a long moment. "Maybe, if I had the right team." Victor nodded. "You will." She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. She walked to her car, head high, steps steady. For the first time that day, she looked like someone no longer carrying the weight alone. Victor didn't feel proud. That wasn't the word. What he felt was responsible, and he planned to stay that way. The next morning he returned, not undercover, not hidden. No hoodie, no disguise. Just Victor. He took a seat on the same bench across the street, clipboard resting on one knee, travel mug in hand. This time, he wasn't watching. He was listening. He wasn't there to catch mistakes. He was there to rebuild trust. At 7 sharp, the shop opened. Jessa had been there since 6, already prepping. Victor noticed the changes immediately. The staff didn't move faster, they moved smarter, with purpose, with clarity. There was no frantic scrambling, no forced smiles. The music was dialed down to the perfect level. Conversation filled the air, not tension. Customers lingered longer, they laughed more. At 8, Victor stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed softly. Jessa looked up from the bar. No surprise in her face, no awkwardness. Just a simple nod. A shared understanding that he was back where he belonged. Without a word, he rolled up his sleeves. She handed him a towel, motioning toward the fridge. "Milk delivery came late again," she said. "We're down to 2 oat cartons." He checked the inventory, made a note on his clipboard, and then he smiled. Not because everything was fixed, but because now they were finally on the path to doing it right. Together. By the time the clock struck 2, the shop had settled into its afternoon rhythm, quiet but not sluggish, like a heart that finally found its pace. Victor stepped back inside and found Rihanna refilling the napkin dispenser near the counter. He approached gently and tapped her shoulder. "Can I ask you something?" he said with a quiet sincerity. She turned, a little surprised, but nodded. "Do you feel supported here? Like you're part of a real team?" There was a pause, longer than he expected. Then she said, "Sometimes. When Jess is here, yeah. She holds things together. But before today," her voice drifted off, as though saying it aloud made it too real. "You don't have to explain," Victor said softly. "I saw it." Rihanna studied his face, her gaze more curious than nervous now. "You're him, aren't you?" He offered a tired smile. "Yeah, I'm him." She didn't flinch. She didn't rush to cover anything up. Instead, she gave a slow nod, her expression thoughtful. "I thought you were too calm to be new." Victor chuckled. "I've had some practice." "Well," she said, "I'm glad you saw it for yourself." "Me too." By the late afternoon, the team had clicked into a rhythm that felt earned, not forced. Karina had returned as promised, folding seamlessly into the flow of the shop. Rihanna, still quiet by nature, now moved with greater purpose. She refilled the condiment bar without being asked and approached Jessa twice with thoughtful suggestions. Victor didn't interfere. He simply watched. At 9:30, he pulled Jessa aside. "We're going to need a new assistant," he said. "You have someone in mind?" She glanced toward the front. "Rihanna's learning fast. She's not there yet, but she could be." Victor nodded. "What would help get her ready?" "Structured training," Jessa replied instantly. "Not just tossing her into a shift and hoping she figures it out. We don't have time for guesswork when we're short-staffed." Victor turned that over in his head. "We'll build a program, and you'll help design it." Her brows rose slightly, but she didn't object. At 10:15, Victor called Lyle to the back office. When Lyle arrived, Victor was already seated, a blank performance review form on the desk in front of him. Only the header had been filled in. District Oversight. Lyle closed the door behind him. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," he began, measured and guarded. "About what I missed." "This isn't about what you missed," Victor said evenly. "It's about what you allowed." Lyle's expression tightened. "I didn't approve of how Troy acted, if that's what you're implying." "You didn't stop it either," Victor said, his voice cool. "And you passed over someone more than qualified because she didn't fit your picture of leadership." "I made a call based on seniority." Victor leaned forward. "Seniority isn't leadership, and we both know that." Lyle didn't respond. Victor tapped the clipboard. "I'm reallocating your role. You'll shadow Karina for a week. No admin privileges. You'll be back on the floor." Lyle's face froze. "You're demoting me. I'm giving you a chance to stay," Victor said. "You've got experience. Use it the right way." There was silence. Then, finally, Lyle gave a single nod. "Understood. You'll report to Jessa during that week," Victor added. "She's your point of contact." Lyle paused at the door. "She's earned it." Victor didn't blink. "We don't need your approval." After Lyle left, Victor stepped outside. The heat of the day had given way to a warm breeze. Across the street, a delivery truck was backing into the loading zone. He saw Rihanna near the front window, handing a drink over with both hands, careful and deliberate. The customer said something, and she replied, not with a nod, but with a full sentence. Progress. At noon, once the lunch rush had cleared, Victor called for a team huddle on the floor. No suits, no speeches, just a whiteboard, a box of sandwiches, and a promise. "I'm here to listen," he said. "We're rebuilding how these stores run, and that starts with you." The team was hesitant at first, but then Karina stepped up. "What if we had a weekly debrief?" she said. "Something that helps each shift communicate what's working and what isn't." Rihanna raised a hand. "New hires don't always know who to ask for help when it gets busy." Jessa waited, then added, "We need consistent accountability, not just from baristas, from management too." Victor looked around the circle. "You'll have it. No applause, no dramatic music. Just quiet understanding." They weren't celebrating yet. They were processing, but the shift had begun. After the meeting, Victor lingered as the others returned to their tasks. He watched Jessa gathering sandwich wrappers and stacking used napkins. "You didn't have to do that," he said. She glanced at him. "You still think I'm not used to it?" He shook his head. "I think you're used to picking up where others drop things." She didn't argue. "Do you want to help build the training program?" he asked. "Not just for this store, for all of them." She paused. "That would mean leaving this store eventually." "Yes." She folded the last box with a calm certainty. "Then I want Rihanna shadowing me before I go anywhere." Victor smiled. Done. At closing, the shop shut down quietly. No fanfare, no drama. Just lights turned off, machines cleaned, chairs stacked in gentle rows. Outside, Jessa turned to Victor. "You're going to do this at the other stores too, aren't you?" He nodded. "Starting next week." She didn't ask. Why? She didn't need to. He watched her drive off, then stood for a moment in front of the shop, eyes reflecting back the soft glow of the storefront. It looked the same from the outside, the same sign, the same windows, the same door. But inside, everything had changed. And this time, it was going to stay that way.